Good morning. Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's 10 a.m. It's Top Trades. Greg Guenthner. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
You got the computer booted up this morning or what?
I do. I didn't have my volume up, but I'm
Ooh,
good now. I got it
I
figured
got
out.
it's a good reminder. I'm going to check my volume because
No,
sometimes
you
my
sound
oh,
good.
see, no, it was too low. It was too low. You got to check it. Sometimes people, those little Zoom ghosts come in and change your volume. Well, everyone, I kid because I know Gunnar was in the office earlier this morning. He's been checking charts all morning. We've got all sorts of things setting up this week. The biggest of all is tomorrow after market, which kind of everyone and their mom are talking about. We've got NVIDIA earnings announcing. I think Gunnar, your mom could definitely be talking about NVIDIA earnings. I'm just saying it's
I don't
coming
know.
out of the woodwork.
Maybe. I didn't know NVIDIA was reporting tomorrow. Why didn't you tell me?
Get with it. All right. Well, let's do a quick agenda as we always do. We've got a lot on the plate today. We got a lot of charts we want to go through, a lot of opportunities, and sort of what's hot and what's not. We've got NVIDIA earnings coming up. They're post market tomorrow. We've got some tech weakness that we're seeing. The markets, again, this has not been an easy market this whole year, but sort of Mag 7, the semis are lagging a little bit. Gunner's going to break that down. We've got Powell and rates. I just checked the math. We're at a 70-30, 70% chance for a 25-point cut,
Yep.
30% chance for a 50-point cut. So that seems to be locking in there, but we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. The rate cut would be scheduled for mid-September when the FOMC meets. We've got Bitcoin kind of making some moves. There's a lot to talk about there, so we want to cover that as well. We might look into pandemic stocks. Got to dust off the playbook there. And then our favorite thing is the bowl economy, which has to do with some restaurants that just put all their food in bowls, which is great. The other thing, it's not on your list, Gunnar, but I kind of want to talk about it. We'll talk about
Yeah.
it a little bit. It's just like, yeah, the politics of America. It's going to be loud. It's going to be loud for a few months. We had the DNC last week. All sorts of things shaping up, and it's in a trading sense, there's going to be winners and losers, and we got to figure out how to get suppress the noise a little bit. So I'll let you rock and roll. The chat is open here on YouTube. We appreciate everyone coming in every week. We've got great chat, great comments, great tickers that are getting sent in. So go ahead. That's open if you want to write in anything there. I'm watching it live. Gunnar, take it away. What should we be looking at today?
Well, first let's talk a little bit about politics. You know how much I love politics. I love
Yeah.
talking about politics. But it's interesting that you say that because on this call, we always talk about what matters to the market right now. And it feels like we're just starting to run like the fall gauntlet of
Yeah.
things that are going to matter soon that maybe don't matter at the moment, if you catch my drift. So, right now, obviously, I bet you if I walked around the corner there and walked by that TV that you have on the wall that's on mute, and I stared at it for maybe 20 or 30 seconds, I bet I would see something about NVIDIA pop up. And the noise about NVIDIA is going to be absolutely deafening through Wednesday night, probably into Thursday, to see the next day reaction since it's reporting after the close. So we're going to get the aftermarket reaction, and then we're going to get the next day, and everybody's going to want to know what NVIDIA is going to do, what it means for the semiconductors, what it means for the Nasdaq, and everything else. So we're going to get inundated with over analysis of everything that comes out of NVIDIA. But we also have the new rate cut regime coming up in September, and so we have all the people looking forward to that, and that's probably why we're seeing a lot of these more rate sensitive groups, cyclicals and growth stocks and all that perking up over the past couple of weeks because it came out of the horse's mouth. Powell said on Friday that we're going to be starting to cut, and 25, 50, whatever it is in September doesn't really matter right now. It's just that it is etched in stone now that the Fed is going to be cutting, and people are taking that as gospel. So we have that to look forward to building up into end of September, right? What's the date that they're going to
I think
be?
the 18th, somewhere around there, it's the
Yeah.
Wednesday. I
So
didn't realize that they called it J Hole, Jackson Hole. Like there's a bunch of people that started doing that. I don't know if it's new or recent, but it's kind of like, oh, it's J Hole speech. And then it's like,
I
Jerome
don't like
Powell.
the
So it's
sound of
like,
that.
I
I
mean,
don't, I don't like that at all.
well,
But
it's been in headlines. So now, from
I
now
agree.
on, Jackson Hole's speech is the J Hole.
Yeah. Well, well, the market didn't get J-hold, right? I mean, it got it got lifted up from the so so we have everybody looking forward to that too after all this Nvidia noise goes away.
Mhm.
Clearly. And then we don't know. We've talked about this before. We're not sure whether or not the first rate cut is going to be like a sell the news type event. I think it might be, at least in the short term, or it might cause a little bit of market turbulence. It's
Yep.
like the market's like a kind of like a child sometimes where it finally gets what it wants, but then it doesn't react like you think it would. And I think that might be the case with the rate cut in the end of September. We'll see how that goes. But then after all that's out of the way, maybe then everybody is really going to start thinking about November 5th and what's going to happen. And I don't know if there's a clear cut candidate that Wall Street really wants in this election right now
But
either.
circle September 10th, that's the first debate, right? So that day and around that time, because that's what happened a few weeks and months ago, right? It was like we had the debate where Trump obviously won, then Trump gets shot.
Yeah.
The markets were reacting to that in a very real way. So we could
Yeah.
see some big fireworks one way or the other around November 10th or September
September.
10th.
Yeah. Is that debate still on as far as we know
I
now?
think so. That's the only
Okay.
one. The Fox one was supposed to be September 4th. That one's off, but I think it's like a more mainstream or whatever,
Okay.
one of the channels, but I think it's still on the 10th.
Well, that'll be interesting. I'm interested to see if we actually get some real market reactions from it.
If anybody knows, write that in the chat. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see anything in there right now, but I think it's still on for the 10th. So, those things are fickle. Like we could see what happens. They might end up switching up the dates or who knows.
Yeah, but now for trading purposes, it feels like to me that obviously, there's no escaping Nvidia, and what happens with Nvidia this week might dictate how people feel about stocks or tech or anything else heading into the end of the week. And then from there, I think it's all about, you know, the market essentially being excited or excitable about the prospect of a small rate cut or the beginning of the rate cut regime. So I think we have that to look forward to. And I would put the election in third place right now, unless, and these things can shift week to week, but unless something changes, I feel like that's the order of operations for right now of things that are top of mind in the market and the items that are going to move stocks one way or the other. Now, back to big tech and Nvidia and semiconductors and all the stuff that really matters at the moment. What's interesting to me and what I wrote about today in the Morning Reckoning and what we've been talking a lot about in the chat is that the Mag 7 stocks, meaning the big mega caps, and the semiconductors, Nvidia toes the line since it's a semi and a Mag 7 stock, they have been lagging the rest of the market during the August snapback rally off of those yen panic lows. And it's becoming, this isn't something that is like you have to dig really far to find. It's becoming very obvious on the charts that this
Mhm.
is happening and people are starting to notice. The action yesterday, we talked about this where we saw decent breadth in the morning, actually. Like there was a lot of stocks moving higher in the mornings. There's a lot of tech growth stuff moving higher in the mornings. The names that were lagging were your big squares here in the heat map. It was Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, Meta. These were the names that were all bright red yesterday morning, while there was a lot of green in industrials. Energy stocks were snapping back. Other tech stocks that aren't in the semiconductor space were doing well. A lot of tech growth stuff was looking good. There was a lot of green around. It did fade a little bit into the afternoon, but for the most part, it was a glaring weakness that the Mag 7s and the semiconductors were lagging a little bit. And then they were doing the same thing earlier this morning, where it was pretty obvious that a lot of those stocks were just not keeping up with the rest of the market. This is the S&P 500 right here. We talked about this chart a lot. We talked about how this is the yen panic here. Obviously, we talked about how we need to break out above this short-term downtrending channel to get going again. It did just that in a very powerful way, in a very fast recovery right there. Now we're just kind of milling around here just below those all-time highs. Looking at the NASDAQ 100, it looks a lot different. And I'm a little frozen here. There we go. Look at how far away we are from those highs right there in the NASDAQ 100. These are your biggest tech stocks right here. It's got to rally another 6% to get back there to those July highs. That's no small potatoes compared to the fact that we had the Dow posting new all-time highs just yesterday. Right here, we have the S&P looking really strong and sitting just below its all-time highs there from July. The NASDAQ clearly behind. And if we look at semiconductors, it's the same story right here. You have SMH. This is the VanEck Semiconductor ETF. Look at how far below we are from this ugly bearish engulfing candle right here from back on July 11th. I'll measure it again just to see how far we have to go from here. It's recovering a little bit from those lows this morning, but you can see here almost 17%. We needed almost 17% rally to get back there to those all-time highs set just a couple months ago. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in these bigger stocks. The way I'm thinking about this as a trader is simply that we had a rotation trade that was beginning to work in the middle of the summer, where we were seeing stocks like small caps, biotechs, other cyclical names starting to break out and to outperform. That was all interrupted by that yen panic. And I'll show you a chart that illustrates this really well. If we look at small caps here, this is the Russell 2000 ETF, IWM. You can see the July breakout right here. Very powerful breakout. And you can tell because look at all the air in between those candlesticks. We have these huge gaps where this thing just went straight up for what? From down here on the 10th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight big gaps higher right here. That's a very powerful move. Before all the panic set in, with the yen carry trade stuff in early August, it was looking very constructive right here. If we just pretend like we didn't know what happened right there, it was looking like this was leaking higher, and this was setting up for a secondary breakout here above this 224, 225 area right here. But instead, what we got is we got that big fake out. This was that Fed day fake out at the end of July right there, where it looked like it was going to close much higher and just run away from us. And then it closed within its range. And then the next day, everything started falling apart. And then you see this this yen panic right here, and it put us way back down here, back down into our range. This is still kind of a messy chart, as a lot of charts were kind of interrupted by what happened in early August. But you can see how quickly this is built back up. Big time outperformer, the IWM was on Friday, where it was up more than 3%. That was easily besting the S&P and the NASDAQ right there. And then yesterday, it did have a decent morning. It faded a little bit into the afternoon. It closed in the green. Today, it's underperforming. It's down about 1%. It's been a little bit more volatile lately, but you can see how it's right back into this breakout area. Tons of air right here. Lots of gaps that have been filled. Lots of indecision from market participants over the past couple months. But it feels like after this interruption right here that gave us all this, it feels like this is ready to take off again at some point right here. And so I'm watching this space for interesting trade ideas. We've talked a lot about smaller biotechs, XBI. They're starting to firm up too. Remember, these were stocks that didn't really participate in the bull market last year. They've been choppy at best this year, and they're just now starting to firm up. XBI here, yeah, it's down today. A lot of stuff is down today, but it's been pushing back up toward the top of this range from late July before the yen panic stuff. Really surged higher again. And look, you can see Monday the 19th had a nice push higher that day, and it has consolidated those gains nicely near the top of that range. That's very bullish. I really like this idea on a breakout of the 102, mid 102s right there, a nice close above there to get us back above this area and to retest this these highs from March right here. But as you can see, like the more I zoom out on this, I mean, it's an ugly chart. Lots of ups and downs, lots of broken looking sideways trends. Let's reset the price scale so we can actually see this thing. But you can see here, it looked like it was trying to base out and post a big base breakout here in Q1, toward the end of Q1. earlier this year and then fell apart and now trying again. Maybe this is just a big kind of cup and handle that it's working on uh, up here in a higher range. We just need to see it hold above like this 100 area and then really push toward 105 to get a good breakout. But either way, this is a group that I'm watching for a bigger rotation. So if we continue to see this sort of rate cut expectation euphoria, maybe it's not euphoria, but excitement that's been going on in the markets, I'm looking toward some of the more rate sensitive stuff. Um, these stocks, solar stocks, other small caps, the stuff that was really hammered in the rising rate environment, to see if that can't continue to build back higher, just on pure emotional anticipation of that first cut, and then we can sort of go from there.
How do you see NVIDIA earnings playing into this? Do you want to dive into that one? Because obviously, like you said, we're not going to be able to hear anything or see anything for probably the next 30 hours other than just NVIDIA earnings, especially tomorrow. Tomorrow, I would not be surprised if the market's just kind of flat or something. It just kind of follows NVIDIA. And
Yeah,
then
it feels like we're kind of hitting the snooze button, and everybody's just sort of waiting to see what happens with Nvidia. I mean, I think it's a great question. I would like to think that like yes, Nvidia's earnings are probably going to affect the tech sector, other semiconductors, and AI adjacent plays. But will it change how people feel about these particular rotation trades? I think it might. If we have a situation where Nvidia just completely blows away expectations again, which is entirely possible. I mean, we've seen reports from other companies, and people have sort of pieced together the fact that Nvidia really is top dog in a way where we have a lot of folks still chasing this trend of trying to catch this tiger by the tail and really play Nvidia and and uh, ride this amazing boom higher that it's been in all year now. But will it steal the thunder of the rotation trades and push everything back toward Mag 7 and semiconductor AI plays? If it really does just blow the roof off, maybe. I think that's entirely possible. Um, from a sentiment standpoint, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, this is not a prediction. This is just me kind of talking with you through like how people might feel about these earnings. Are we going to be in a situation where no matter how good the number is, it's just not good enough? And that we're not going to get the huge positive reaction that people are expecting? I don't know. That's just me kind of thinking out loud and trying to, figure out how folks might think about it. We're not going to know till we know, obviously. But I mean, we have a situation here where I think it's universally accepted that NVIDIA is going to impress with their numbers. And if that's the case, and if the bar really is that high, then how much are they going to have to beat by? And how good is guidance going to have to be in order to really get people to just buy with both hands here and push this thing back to 140 plus and new all-time highs? I think you told me yesterday when we were talking, the implied move is what, like 10%?
yeah, I don't know what it is today, but it's in
Yeah.
general 10%,
Yeah. So I mean, I think the ultimate
12 bucks.
screw you move that Nvidia could do is just to not have that big a reaction at all to earnings. Be kind of be up or down like 3%. After I know that feels improbable, but I feel like that would be like the ultimate surprise move from
The
Nvidia.
screw you moves have gotten very complicated lately, though.
I
What's going to
know.
happen, right? It might do something. This is my best guess, right? I think they beat. I think it goes up at some point. Maybe it's only post
Yeah.
market or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you start getting the crowd of like, sell the news. Like, that's it. That's as good as it can get. And we're getting a cut. So it's like a beat, spike, and then drop. And again, that could happen over a day or so after earnings.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, like, and that would be pretty bearish. I think on the flip
Yeah.
side, we could get a situation where maybe the black and white numbers don't impress people that much, and you get a big red candle aftermarket, and then you get management sounding much more bullish on the call, or something happens there where the opposite happens, where people try to dump it after hours, and then Thursday morning they're back to buying it and they buy it back to break even or back into the green or something like that, which would obviously be bullish. But I mean, there's
Yeah.
a million different scenarios like that could occur. I think the market right now is obviously trying to jockey for a position and try to find any way maybe to play it that's not directly Nvidia. Um, we were talking earlier this morning, and I know people in chat were talking about it. Hindenburg came out with a short report on SMCI earlier this morning. I forget
I
what their
missed
final
it. I
target
missed
was.
the trade, dude. I wanted to play a little SMCI downside,
You know,
and now I have the ship has sailed.
well, SMCI is an interesting case because it's already been breaking down. It doesn't look like Nvidia at all anymore, and it topped out way back in February and hasn't really caught that momentum again. So I'm very interested to see like what becomes of all this because, and again, I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but like typically, what people suspect happens with these groups that disclose a huge short position and release these short reports is they just cover into the panic after the report comes out. So they immediately start covering after they've released their thesis publicly because they reserve the right to do that in the fine print of their report. They're like, look, we have this huge short position we've amassed. Here's why. Here's why we don't like the stock. They scare people with it, and then they come in that day and they cover into that panic, like all or some of their position right there, and make a few bucks. Uh, Doing that kind of activity. But I don't know if that's the case here or not, obviously. But I mean, I am looking at a chart here where SMCI what was down like 8%
Yeah.
yesterday in
It doesn't look
pre-market.
that bad today. Look, it's climbing. It's
No, I
only
mean
down
it opened.
2% now.
It was immediately popping off those lows. I think it was down like I think when I messaged you about that short report, it was down to like 508 or so in
Yeah.
pre-market trade, and it's all the way back near in the mid 540s right now. So folks bought that dip. Is this a situation people fading the short report into earnings? Or what? I think somebody in chat mentioned that like the short interest in SMCI is up to like 15%. That's getting up there kind of high. So I mean, could we
Yeah.
have a situation where, I think about this two different ways. And again, we're waxing philosophical about NVIDIA earnings here. If NVIDIA earnings are just amazingly great, is that bullish for other semiconductor stocks, or is NVIDIA just sucking all the air out of the room and taking all that business? So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really know how folks are going to react to it as far as sympathy plays go. If NVIDIA has such a great report, is SMCI gonna tail along with it and be up 15% on Thursday, or are folks going to be like, I don't want the stock, I want NVIDIA, and they're going to sell this and buy NVIDIA? I don't know.
Yeah. What if we talk hypothetical here? Because I bet I'm using the word bet, so I guess the pun is intended or whatever, but like I feel like people want bets on this thing, right? That's what I'm thinking. I'm just
Well,
thinking, hey, there's something big happening. This is obviously a speculation. This isn't going to be something that is your paid publication, the trading desk. This isn't the mindset for that. So this is all hypothetical, but like are there any bets that you see out there that would be a good setup for this thing? Like, say it beats one way heavy or it misses one way heavy. Is there anything that you like out there to play one way or the other? Again, completely hypothetical.
um, so hypothetically, if you think NVIDIA is going to miss, then I would say that any of the other semiconductors are probably also a very strong short. Um, because if NVIDIA can't hack it and can't beat estimates, then AMD is not going to beat, then SMCI is not going to beat. So if you're digging around and you're like, it's too expensive to play, NVIDIA downside or whatever, um, I would look at something like AMD. And I think it's at a level right now where, I mean, this is a really messy chart. And this is an old line that I have on there, but like it was never really able to convincingly recapture this 160 area right here. It posted a decent rally into July that's fizzled, and then it's gone back and retested the scene of the crime right there. And now it's kind of trending lower. I feel like something like this on the short side, that might be a strong play. Uh, because again, think of it this way, like NVIDIA is the clear market leader, and lots of folks agree that, best product, best sales, they're taking all of the business from the AI bubbles. Well, then AMD isn't, I mean, that's, think of it that way. So, I mean, I would look to play this maybe to the downside if you think NVIDIA is not going to do well, because, you might get a quick move down to the 130,
Yeah.
uh, or maybe in the 120s. I don't know.
But and this is from me, so don't take any advice from me. Um, But Nvidia's puts aren't even that like they're not actually crazy expensive.
Oh, they're
Like if you
not?
go to
Okay.
the 115s, again, this is completely just gambling on earnings, which
This is an official Matt Inslee recommendation that everyone
we
should buy.
advise we fully advise against. But if like, and this is what people want to hear these days, right? That's
Oh, I
what
know. Yeah, yeah,
everyone's
yeah.
talking about. But if you're saying, okay, we're gonna just play earnings, not worry about anything else, you would have probably the Friday expiration. So you're gonna have the Friday
Yeah.
expiration for Nvidia. The 115 puts are like 175. If you go to the 110 puts, they're like 90 cents. Like it could go. This thing could. You have something bad, and somehow they've been hiding it, right? And they're like, "Oh, the Blackwell's delayed, and this thing's that, and we're topping out." Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen because I think they're probably going to say a bunch of really good things, right? But
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if for some reason any of that happens, this thing could easily go to 110.
Oh, yeah. 110 is only a 13% drop
Yeah. So
from what
110,
it.
all your break even, you buy the 110s, your break even's at 109. Like, not too bad. So there's ways to play this thing again. Don't get crazy. That's what we're not advising doing any of these bets that are in a sensible, big money way, but in a speculative account and in a world where all other types of betting is legal. You know, this is a spectacle that we're going to see in the next 30 days or next 30 hours, not 30 days, maybe 30 days.
Well, speaking of bets, do you want to talk horses?
Oh yeah, yeah. So here's the thing: if anyone's from Maryland, there's Maryland State Fair. And the Maryland State Fair has this little track that horses race on only once a year, which is kind of like it's probably a bad idea. But the track's from like 1800s or whatever. It's cool, like State Fair or whatever. One of our friends, very trusted, we've worked with him for almost 2 decades. He was at the fair at the betting windows and stuff, and he overheard a couple of like 30 somethings. So it's like two guys in their 30s talking, and like in general, it was kind of the idea that like like after I get all my income from my paycheck or whatever, I put at least 20% into stocks because stocks, they're just going up. They just keep going up. They just go up. And then the other guy is something like, oh yeah, I haven't done that, but like I need to get some more money into it because I mean, they're just going to keep going up. And again, they weren't joking. They weren't being sarcastic. This was a very real sort of a taxi driver sign of the times out there. And my friend was overhearing this whole thing. So these are just two guys in their 30s that are like, dude, you got to put more money into stocks because they just go up. So Gunnar, give us your take on that. Like, say that conversation is kind of happening around the space because you might have had tons of retail come in 2020, which they did. They're sitting
Yeah.
around on their couches, stuck at home, wearing masks by themselves or whatever, betting on stocks because they had all this money and they're like, I better open a brokerage account. They open up Robinhood. And now those people 4 years later are like, stocks only go up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Is
mean,
that a buy or a sell? How do you think about that type of sentiment indicator?
well, I mean that's obviously squishy sentiment, and
Yep.
I think it's fun to kind of like get into conversations like that, and like it's like the old shoe shine anecdotes from the Roaring Twenties. The shoe shine boys were giving stock tips in Lower Manhattan, or like your taxi driver starts talking about stocks, and people say like, oh man, now it's like the rally's getting long in the tooth here. I think that's entirely possible that like it's a good contrarian indicator. But I think it lags probably. I think when you start hearing palpable conversation about stocks only go up, and people not just talking about Nvidia or Apple or whatever the hot idea du jour happens to be, but they're just talking about stocks. They're like, put your money in the stock market. The stock market doesn't go down. We have to do this. Maybe you get like maybe you get a huge wave higher from something like that because you're getting this big buy-in um, from folks that are essentially sideline cash, and they're getting into the market. So I think you can look at it two different ways. You can be like, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of euphoria in this market. Maybe they're going to shake the branches. Um, but also like if that is the prevailing wind right now, that like stocks only go up and things are looking really good again after the bear market we had in 2022 where stocks literally only went down, um, and 2023 was a nice snapback move, and and there was a little bit of fear creeping into the market back in the fall, but we've had really from the outside looking in, we've had really good looking conditions since we've had such strong mega caps and this big AI narrative kind of float everything. And so if you've only been watching, the NASDAQ or the SPY or whatever, yeah, it looks like really smooth sailing. And the fact that they were saying something like that after what happened in early August, when I was approached by a couple different people the Friday before um, the yen panic, the Friday before that Monday when the market was going down. I had two non-market people within a couple hours ask me like, how bad is this? How bad is the stock market going to get? How low do you think the stock market's going to go? Just general questions like that, because they seem to have noticed that things had started to go down. Maybe the fact that it was such a quick recovery, people have already forgotten about it or pushed it out of their heads. I think that's a possibility, but that's really the only real like corrective action we've had this year. We've had a couple of smaller, uh, drawdowns, but I mean, as far as like an actual like move that feels a little bit scary, that's the only thing. I mean, what happened in early August? That's it. That's all we've had. Everything else
Yeah.
has been easy going. No one has been really freaked out or scared out of any of their positions except for them.
Yeah, no one's really getting burned. And again, that mindset is the same kind of mindset that you'll see in the housing market, probably today's housing market, but absolutely back in the 2005 to 7 range, where it was
Yeah.
just kind of like you just buy houses, they go up. And you had all these
Right.
people
Yeah.
flipping houses, and you had people doing all kinds of crazy stuff on houses. It's like, don't worry about the math. You just buy a house. You know,
Right. It doesn't
that
it doesn't matter
does,
it doesn't matter if you spend too much, because in a year your house is gonna be worth 10% more anyway. So
yeah.
why would you not buy it? Right.
And the
It's
music stops on that, but the music does not have to stop in a rational way.
right.
That concept in 2005 was very loud. Oh, this is crazy. Why are people buying these houses they can't afford? Well, guess what? That lasted 2.5 more years. So
Right.
that's what Gunnar told me. And I do see the side of it too. Well, you could listen to those folks that are at the horse track that are in their 30s that are just plowing money into stocks and say, oh my gosh, the top is in. But the timing, that could actually be in the middle or the beginning of a meltdown because those people are not worried at all. They're throwing more money in today to stocks. They're like, oh, more money, more money.
Yeah.
So it's something to keep an eye on, but that's all real. That's happening out there in America right now. We got a lot of money in stocks and no one's been burned in a while.
Right. It feels good when you're not constantly having to look over your shoulder, be like, oh, this holding's down or whatever. I don't know what these guys are investing in or how they're doing it. But I mean, if you've only been putting money into like, an index fund or whatever, like our horse track guy, maybe that's what he was doing since he was just saying the stock market.
Hmm.
He hasn't, he could be opening up every statement every month and being like, man, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like, like no
He
adjustment
is.
necessary here.
Yes, he's crushing it. Like in
Yeah.
the last couple of years, he's crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think that kind of, it all snowballs, obviously. Then that's how markets work. People get cockier and they start buying at higher and higher prices, and then eventually they get spooked out of positions. And it happens in the middle of bull markets too. Let's be clear about that. I'm not saying the market has to crash. I'm saying that you could have a situation where everybody gets really bulled up, and again, this is not, I'm going to do what you did earlier, Matt. This is not a prediction or a recommendation right here.
Mhm.
But we could have a situation where everybody gets really bowled up into mid-September because rate cuts are coming and they're throwing a huge party. And then it happens, and then we get like a 10-15% sell-off. Maybe a slow grinder, into October, some October surprise or something. People get cold feet about the election.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that could happen that spook all those people that figured, hey, the party's coming, and they get kind of burned on a sell the news event, and then we go higher after everybody gets flushed out. After, like those two guys that were walking along at the racetrack, the one guy that his buddy was like, hey, you got to get back into stocks, and he finally gets his shit together and then gets back into stocks in late September, and then he's down 10% immediately, and now he's mad at his friend.
Yeah.
He told him to get back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, all that sort of stuff can happen, and we can easily launch higher into Q4, and then that's it. Everybody just got spooked a little bit, but I mean that's how it works, right? That's how the market works. It tricks you into reacting the wrong way at those extremes, and you end up with with holding the bag sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to talk any more in PAL and sort of rates, or you think we've got that? It's kind of a question mark, and we go on. Maybe we talk Bitcoin. What do you want to cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think like like I've said, just to sum that up, I think we could be back into a rotation trade mode, um, but at the same time, Nvidia could interrupt that um, at some point after earnings. We'll see how people feel about things on Thursday, but I do like how small caps, how other cyclicals, biotechs, how all those are kind of setting up and outperforming right here. I think that's interesting. I think it's worth watching. I think we could get some really good trades out of that. Um, I think Bitcoin is right now at a pretty important level after Friday's rally. Um, the whole reason that we got into a crypto miner trade over at the trade desk was because it felt like Bitcoin was falling behind. It's usually pretty heavily correlated with like tech growth type trade, and it wasn't really playing nice here in mid-August, but it was firming up and looked like it wanted to turn higher and push above 60. Well, that's what it did. And then on Friday, we had a nice big candle. Finally, it felt like we were watching paint dry, which rarely happens in crypto. You,
Hmm.
things are usually moving and shaking. It wasn't doing much here in mid to late August, and then we finally got a real extension above 60K. Started the day on Friday, in the low 60s, and then finished the day around 63, 64. Nice $4,000 move higher. It consolidated nicely over the weekend, didn't really do much. And then on Monday, it was consolidating up in the 63 range too, and it started to fade in the afternoon when a lot of the other stocks that were doing pretty okay in the morning started to creep into the red as well. And now it's doing the same thing today. It's right back down here near those previous highs from that other big thrust higher on August 8th, which was a nice move too. I would like to see it bounce in order to keep this move viable, this shorter term move. I'm not saying it's going to completely break down again and it's going to revisit the low 50s if it doesn't move higher from here. That's not the case at all. It could be. I don't think that's the case. But in order to keep the momentum of this nice thrust higher going, I would like to see it catch. Now that we've given back about half, maybe a little bit more than half right here, and we're down in this area right here, which seemed to offer some sort of resistance. Some sellers coming in the high 61s. Let's see if this can't catch and at least move sideways or higher here and get back up towards 64 to prove that this is going to go and it's going to have a little bit more momentum here. So that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for in crypto heading into the latter half of this week. We're getting dinged a little bit on our Mara play. Mara obviously looked great on Friday afternoon. It looked great yesterday morning. It's since faded a little bit. We're not in the danger zone yet, but I would like to see a bounce here so we can get back into triple digit gain territory and see how far it can extend.
Yeah.
So we got that right there. And then I think the growth names too. I think we're at a point where it's like, are these really going to get going? Because there are so many big bases. And again, this is going to sort of tie into what we were talking about, Matt, with those old pandemic stocks sort of like creeping back into the picture. And we're starting to see actually positive news come out of some of these. I don't know how long it's going to last or what's really going to stick, because I think we might get a rising tide and then some of the worst ones fall off, but some of the better ones really catch and go higher. But our old friend Zoom,
I'm hoping I chirped enough about Zoom.
look at that.
Let the record state, right? We didn't have a call last week. The week before, I was talking Zoom, and I
Yeah,
was in a position, still in the position. I think it's 25% now. Look at that candle.
that's
Come on.
great. Look at all those candles. Green, green, green. And big volume too. I mean, this was obviously left for dead. We've been chirping about this stock for a while now. I'm not an earnings trader. I don't play earnings.
Yeah, this
This
was a gamble, and then no
this
one
was an
can predict
earnings
that kind of stuff.
move,
But yeah,
but
that's what
but
top trades is for, not the
but we
trading
we've
desk.
talked about this. We've talked about it with Enrique, and it just feels like Zoom is one of those names where it's like it's not going to go to zero. It's going to get bought before it goes to zero.
Yep.
Um, and I mean, the more I zoom out, the more you're going to see just how broken this this chart had been. Here's I mean, here's the pandemic, the beginnings of the pandemic right here. There's February 2020 at the beginning of the mountain, and then the highs were October 2020. So this one topped out well before, a year later was when the other big runners were topping out, in October, November 21. But October 2020 was when this one topped out, and it's just been crushed ever since then. Not even really that strong of a base since we kept on making lower lows. Even heading into July, we were making lower lows. Well below pandemic lows, well below IPO lows for this, and now it's popping back up. Could be a big change of trend. I would like to see it consolidate more in the 70s here before I get really too excited about it. We're back here at these levels where sellers came in. We haven't had a bad day since those earnings. It's been creeping higher ever since, but I'm interested to see how it digests going forward. But this, I mean, obviously one of the most obvious pandemic stocks out there. We're on Zoom platforms all the time. Still, I like the product. It's a great product. I hate the stock for obvious reasons, and we're going to see if I hate it less, you know, in the weeks to come. But also, the old exercise bike with
Here
an
we
iPad
go.
to it. This is another one where it's like, okay, is this thing basing out and ready to roll? Actually posted good earnings that got people excited, up 35% after posting earnings last Thursday. And now it's consolidating here just below $5. Right here, where it totally fell apart after, I guess those were Q4 earnings that it reported in early February. But you can see here also very similar, actually worse, much worse, since this is the pandemic crash right here. It was a young IPO at the time, and it crashed to $18, which was the end of the world for this stock, except for the end of the world is actually over here in 2024, where it's plumbing lows, around $3, just below $3 right there, and now it's trading near $5. I don't want to make the comparison that like maybe we have another Carvana on our hands, but we like stocks that like look like they're going to go to zero, and then all of a sudden maybe they're not going to go to zero, maybe they're going to do okay, and that's pretty darn bullish. So we'll see how this one consolidates as well. I still think it has some work to do here, in this area around $5, and we'll see how it digests that move, just like with Zoom. And what's management going to do too? I mean, is this a situation where they're going to try to take advantage of the price bump and issue shares or something like that? Like, what are the, I think a lot can happen. Is a suitor going to come by and say, like, we'll throw down some cash and we'll buy whatever's left of Peloton and try to figure it out? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out, since these stocks were such super hot traders just a few years ago, and then they just completely fell apart.
Yeah, anything else in the I guess the pandemic stocks? 'Cause I mean Zoom and Peloton, they kind of look the same, For all of my great research on Zoom, it's the same, it's the same look as Peloton. So
Well, I mean, I think they trade on the same emotional wave, you
yeah,
know.
the bankruptcy bounce.
Well, yeah, I think like financially, and this is just me guessing. I haven't really dug into it, but I don't think Peloton was in as good a shape. Um,
Oh,
I
I
think
agree. Like, I
I think
mean,
there were some real questions about whether or not they were gonna keep that business, going. So we'll see how they restructure and how lean they can get and moving forward here. But I mean, the fact that like earnings weren't some big negative surprise here, they actually surprised on the positive side. That's something. So
yeah,
we will see. We'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, I think there's I think there's a lot of interesting stocks that were left for dead. A lot of the stuff that was just hit hard by folks that just assume like this thing can't survive in a rising rate environment, you know, and
hmm
that environment is over now, barring
yep,
some cataclysmic event that we can't see. That's we're done with that, and we're going to see slowly lowering rates, I would assume, and so maybe that changes the mood for all of these names.
yeah. That's the biggest risk. I'm sorry, we're taking it back to we're sort of going high and low here, and we're going back to interest rates real quick. But that is really the biggest risk there in the middle of September in the FOMC meeting is that they cut rates, and then in the presser A couple minutes later, they go, we're going to see what happens for a
Yeah.
while. So they cut rates, but then they don't keep cutting. That could be another thing that pressures the market. So we'll see what's going to happen. And then again, you're going to get a presidential election. Trump wins. He's probably not keeping Jay Powell in there. So there's all sorts of things that can happen with the Fed and rates. So a lot of moving pieces there to keep in mind. All right, Gunnar, what else we got? What other sectors should we be looking at here? One of
Well,
our favorites.
here's the thing. Like, I think we were more excited about the bowl economy when we were doing this, when we were doing the Zoom at 11, and it was closer to lunch, and then we were really thinking about bowls more.
Yeah.
But
Well, still thinking about them right now.
here's an interesting indicator I want to tell you about. Um, my my parents, who are, by the way, my parents are afraid to go to Chipotle because they don't know how to order. Okay.
All they have to do, now we
So
make fun of, now we do like the dad jokes. All they have to do is reach their head over the glass and point at stuff and cough on
yeah,
things. That's
yeah,
all they have to do to order at Chipotle.
yeah. So they're afraid to go to Chipotle. But however, this is interesting. They've been to Kava recently and they liked it. And I think Kava is kind of even more intimidating to order
That's
from.
the
It's just
same.
it's the same thing. It's the same idea. So they were traveling, and I hadn't talked to them in like a week, and I talked to them, and they came back from traveling, and they were talking about how they went and ate at Kava with one of my other relatives, and I was like, you went to Kava? I didn't even know they knew it existed. But they're like, oh yeah, we have one in town too, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So so the 70 plus 80 plus crowd is familiar with Kava, and is ordering their food there. So that, I think that's some interesting boots on the ground research right there for me right there. That's a
I
um
like it. I like where this is coming from. We don't even need the chart anymore. Just
yeah,
throw the
that's
chart
yeah.
out. You got that research going on. That's like me, dude. All right. Well, that chart is obviously looking good. We didn't meet up last week, but we would have
Yeah, earnings, it spiked 20% on really strong earnings. Obviously, I mean, this thing is up in the stratosphere right here. It's down today, but I mean, it's been going straight up. And we were talking about it back here. It did get a little messy. Everything got a little bit messy, and everything was a little bit interrupted in late July, early August with that little mini meltdown we had. But now it feels like everything's back on track. Kava is. I think it would. I think it drives fundamental investors crazy because Kava is trading at a huge premium. It's a very quote unquote expensive name, and I get it. But you know, on the flip side, people are paying for growth, and everything I've read that I kind of run into some of this research that I've read recently is that like Kava's growth plan is better than Chipotle's was back in the early days. So take that with a grain of salt. But that is the mood surrounding this stock right now. And that is why it spiked from a low of 73 on yen panic to, the high 120s following earnings. I think it might get a little bit messy in here consolidating, but at the same time, um, it's a pretty killer chart. Food in a bowl, that's where it's at right now. I think this is, the fast casual growth story that's happening right now. And we've talked about a bunch of other ones, but the perceived um, health of these type of places, juxtaposed with like Taco Bell or whatever, I think is big. And we've known for years what Chipotle can do. Chipotle is still kind of building from the CEO poaching. The CEO of Chipotle was poached by Starbucks. I think we talked about that a couple weeks ago, didn't we,
we
Matt?
were on the call with Enrique, and
That's
I
right.
believe it was right around this time. I think that was almost a bottom tick. It was
It was.
almost
It
the
was. I think it was
perfect time to
was it the
purchase.
day of? Was it the
It
day
was
of?
the
Yeah,
day of at
Tuesday
like
the 13th.
10:30.
And he was like, I'm
Yeah, we're in
buying
that
right
little
now.
tail, and he's like, that looks good to me.
Yeah.
So
So it's still
hopefully
building.
some
I think
people, if
it's
you bought that right into the comments, because I mean, we were talking pretty heavy on it. It was a pretty decent looking, the
yeah, I think it I
baby
think it
with the
looks
bathwater.
I think it looks constructive right here. And obviously it's pushing higher today in kind of a mixed tape, which is nice to see. Um, but Starbucks too, though. I mean, Starbucks, I think, looks is doing a good job. I mean, like if we were gonna mark up this chart right here, I would say that it's breaking out of like its little consolidation following the announcement of the CEO poaching, and it looks like it's pushing higher. I mean, look, it's back above these pivot highs right here from December of 23. I think Starbucks looks good as well. This is a mess, clearly, right in here. But I think that like this turnaround story is sticking. Everybody likes the new CEO. This could be, a big thing right here. Starbucks, not a coffee company, a dessert company, you know.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna
Yeah.
do?
So they got a new CEO, and the CEO is what? The guy from Chipotle.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's,
yeah. They poached him. So
yeah. But
uh,
that's a great looking chart in the sense that like that's what the markets kind of like to do. They kind of like to screw you. If you're a long-term Starbucks watcher, you
ooh,
kind of know that 90 to $100 range. And all of a
yes,
sudden this thing went from 70 to 90 and no one even knew. Like it was like, oh,
yep.
sorry, you missed it. Now it's just valued where you thought it should be, but you weren't in it. So too bad because the sky was falling the day before.
I mean, these earnings back in May were the end of the world for it. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that was down 15, 16%, a huge gap lower. Prices not seen since, you know, the summer of 22. All of these hard fought gains gone. I mean, if you're a long
See
term,
if you can go further back out because I do feel like that maybe I'm making it up at that 90 to 100 range. Like it's like a,
no, you're right.
yeah.
It always got over it and then went right back down. So I mean, the stock hasn't done anything since December of 2020 right now.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how this develops. But I think shorter term, it looks pretty bullish. Three nice big candlesticks right now. I know this one's not complete yet, but it's pushing towards highs right here. Can't really complain about that too much. That looks pretty decent. And I think it's an interesting story as well. Like maybe this is a big narrative change for the old Starbucks. So we'll see how it operates from here. But I like the look of something like that. You have a big event, and then it absorbed that information in a very bullish fashion. Didn't really give back much. Didn't even come close to eating away at this gap right here. Just sort of faded a little bit for a couple weeks, and now it's blasting higher. Bullish looking to me.
Yep. All right. We have one ticker from the comments. Roku. I saw that one on the board
Yeah,
recently.
that's a good one.
Roku
Is that
is
now? Are we considering Roku a pandemic stock? This is just an
no,
aside.
no.
No.
And this is, I don't mean to offend anyone, but I was like making fun of our parents anyway for like reaching over the thing at Chipotle. But
Yeah.
like, this is another thing. It's like my parents are just freaking Roku'd up. They got Roku's coming out everywhere and they're like, they know how to use that little remote. So I
Yeah.
think it's less of a pandemic thing and more of it's kind of the smart TV or the easy to use TV app thing that people are, like I think older generation they're using it.
Yeah. I'm gonna modify. We got Roku TVs at the house. The kids use it. They love it. Um,
See, kids can even use it because the remote is like,
the
I don't know
kids,
if
the
you've seen
kids
it. The
can
remote is
use
that little
kids
teeny
can
thing.
kids can use that Roku, man. The kids know how to use the Roku. Come on. I'm gonna modify this chart a little bit so I have some old lines on here. But look at this. I mean, like that's a decent looking base that it's coming out of right here. What was the news? Was there any news here? Or did this thing just blast off up 11%? I don't see anything really. What's going on with Roku stock? Um, but yeah, I think this looks really good. Um, I like this flush right here. And, you know, I love keeping the earnings dates on my charts right here. I'm not an earnings trader, but price action around earnings can tell us a lot. And Matt, you know that I love plays where you get this false reaction after an earnings announcement and then it does the opposite. I
Mhm.
think those are really powerful changes in trend in the making right there. And I think this might have been one of them right here. I mean, we had earnings on the first, and then everybody thought they were bad. And then a couple days later, they're like, well, actually, maybe I like that and I'm going to buy this thing. So
Mhm.
you have this candle out right here where this is the panic lows down here near like 49, and now we're up near 69, 70, and we're breaking out of this base. I think this is like the kind of stock that could be in play right here. We do have like some serious gaps, and if you look back here, this is nasty. This is some ugly action back here before this line. You know, this is a can't win choppy mess unless you're like really short term minded trader and you're just trying to play some of these pops and drops. But it looks like we're moving out of the space right here. I think it's a little premature to say like, oh, we're going back to 90, 95. But I would like to see how it consolidates. Maybe it has to sort of rest after this big candle right here where it was up 12% on the day. That was Friday. And it has to rest a little bit, and then it can push maybe into this gap a little bit more. This lonesome guy down here where it was down 23% after earnings back in February. Not a good look, but maybe
Yeah.
we move into thin air right here. Maybe it kind of teases the top of this range at 77 before pushing higher. And I'm talking weeks and weeks from now. But yeah, I think this is an interesting setup. And this stock used to be a really good runner. I mean, like this back before all this, this was a good pandemic trader. I don't know if you remember that. It wasn't like a pandemic stock like Chewy, Zoom, you know, uh, Peloton, but at the same time, this is the pandemic crash lows down here in um, March 2020 down in the 60s, and it ran all the way to almost $500.
Wow.
So pretty
Yep.
nice. Obviously, it melted down with the rest of those names in 2020 in mid 2021, and then 2022 was a disaster. But again, maybe this is like, this is folks like pulling up the old Rolodex, breaking out the black book of, the old stocks they used to trade during ZERP days and thinking like, well, maybe they're going to get going again now that J Powell is going to be cutting rates. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But I think it's an intriguing chart.
All right. Another one from the chat. How about Nike NKE? See what that one looks like.
Yeah, Nike's I was actually reading a lot about Nike recently because I'm interested in the company. I like Nike stuff. Um, I like their running shoes. This is one of those companies that it 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 strayed from the path for a while, and it made some poor management decisions, and it has not been able to recover. And I think this is like this is kind of a do or die moment, I would say, for Nike the stock. Um, I don't think it's necessarily like a bad buy here. It might take it a while to get going again. If you're looking for like a longer term like comeback play, I think this might be one. I think they're going to try to right the ship. Um, but I mean, you can see this is the pandemic lows down here in the 60s, and we're really not that far removed. There was a big negative reaction again to earnings, down 20%, and this is a Dow stock, and it's dropping 20% on earnings this summer, and it's been trying to turn the corner here. For a shorter term trade, I think it looks very constructive that it hasn't filled this gap and it's kind of leaking higher right here. And maybe it has enough juice to run in the short term all the way up to like 88, and get up into the bottom of this range before it needs to consolidate again. I think that's possible because it does have some time. It probably has like a month or so until earnings. Earnings are on the 24th. So you do have some time there for something like this. But yeah, I would say like I would want to, if I'm thinking about this like as a longer term, like, okay, Nike is a storied brand in athletic wear. It will eventually figure things out and get going again. I think you could start buying it around this level with like a stop somewhere down here, maybe in the mid 70s, and start buying chunks of it to see if it really gets moving again. And then if it starts like breaking major levels, if it gets back over 100, maybe that's a second buy point where you can sort of like assume that like it's trying to base out and move higher. But I mean, that chart over the past few years, the fact that a stock like this has been unable to like keep up with the rest of the market, I think is pretty damning.
Yep. Holly had a good comment. Holly's always got the good comment. She said all these stocks from the pandemic because people had to stay home.
Yeah.
And now they're home because of the economy.
Now they're home because they can't afford to go out.
They're home because they lost their jobs. They're back at it. They got the Roku sitting on Zoom, riding around their little Peloton. Real sad. All right, that was mean. Someone wrote in ASTS. I guess I have to honor that because I chirped about ASTS for so many weeks or whatever. I'm out of my ASTS. It looked
What?
great.
You're
I
out of
can't, dude. I can't. I'm
ASTS?
not mentally. This is the thing. This is what Gunnar teaches me and different things. You have to know who you are as a trader and I guess
Uh,
either fight against it or whatever. Once I make a decent amount of money on something, I can't stay in there. I get too emotional on the
yeah.
ups and downs because by the time you've made a lot of percentage, it's like these little moves at the end there are taking a decent size of that percentage out of the gate. So I don't know. At some point, I just got worried. At no point in time does that chart look bad, though. Look at that thing.
No,
Oof.
and I think it looks very constructive, even consolidating up here in the mid 30s. I mean, like you got to assume it's flagging right there until it shows you otherwise, right? It's a very good. I mean,
Yeah, I screwed up. I
that's an
screwed up.
insane move. And it's funny, like I was, I mean, kind of joking, but not really. But looking at ASTS, is RKLB the next ASTS?
Hey, let's go.
Not as pretty, but like, another cheapie. It's got rocket in the name. This is important research. It has rocket in the name, you
Now
know?
the narrative for
So,
ASTS is too strong, dude. It's like they're the ones that's gonna beam the signal down to your cell phone. I
so
don't know
this
what
was
Rocket
look,
Lab
this
does.
this this thing started moving off of like the low fives into the sevens. I mean, that's a big move right there. We're talking like what, 12% one day, 9% the next, and then what is it, another nine in a row? I mean, that's a nice 3 day pop right there. And it's a little sloppy right now, and it's down today. But if this thing can like really gather itself and in this messy consolidation right here and start to push higher back into the sevens, it could go again. Maybe we're in that type of market eventually. I don't know. But I mean, the fact that ASTS actually looks as good as it does after making such a move like that, that's incredible. Because like
Yeah, it's holding.
everything about this is technically not is technically beautiful, where it's like, okay, you got the big volume thrust higher, and then you have the volume dwindling, and you have it flagging right here, you know, just oh so perfectly. And everybody's just sort of staring at their screen now, waiting for that other big green candle to emerge and just
And
pop.
that makes sense. The volume's dwindling a little bit. It's just a little bit of like profit taking. It's
Yeah.
probably like dummies like me getting out
Yeah,
of
but
there, and then all of a sudden it
there's
shoots
nothing
again.
bearish looking about this chart, though. Is the thing. So
Yeah. One thing, and this is the opposite. I want to bring this up because we might be talking about it over the next coming weeks and months. It's kind of the opposite of a rocket. It's like the falling knife or dropping rock. Can you pull up the dollar chart?
yeah, I guess.
I mean, again, not there's not a ton to talk about here in this quickly, right? So we're not going to cover the dollar in depth, but like if you go to like a 10-year, I don't know if you can do that. You go to like 5-year and drag it out or something, but like um I mean, that thing is it's getting somewhere interesting where if it falls, like where does it stop?
Yeah, I don't, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
it's
will
definitely.
say just something to keep
I
an eye
think
on
it's at
that
a
thing.
point. I think it's at a point now where it should bounce a little. I would assume, in the short term,
Yeah.
you know, with everything that's happening, I think that like this is a pretty significant rollover right here since July 1st. Then we had the whole. I mean, obviously the strong yen is affecting this. Um, but yeah, this feels like a spot where we're going to get some sort of a bounce. And if it's a weak bounce and then we start turning lower, then maybe it's time to start thinking about like, you know, at least coming down here and retesting the summer 2023 lows or lower, maybe like,
Hmm.
98-ish. I mean, those are big moves for currency. So we'll see. Um, but yeah, I mean, on the flip side of this, look at this chart. You probably never I'm stuck. I'm frozen. There we go.
Woo,
Look at this guy. I mean,
nothing wrong
and
there.
And we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the
Yeah,
call
we're
too.
looking at gold. If anyone can't see that ticker,
Yeah, this is
this is just the price of gold.
this is gold. Nobody's talking about gold right now. Nobody. I think that's really important. This is a very quiet breakout here. Very quiet move to all-time highs. If there was nothing else happening, if this was like your typical summer doldrums market where there was no Nvidia earnings and nobody cared, and there was no like rate cut scuttlebutt happening, I think that financial media would be all over this and be like, oh, precious metals, like look at gold. What does this mean? And they would have a bunch of time to fill with it. But right now, crickets everywhere on gold. Look how great the chart looks. These are all-time highs right here. It's consolidating nicely. It's marching higher nicely. We're starting to get like positive uh, reactions to gold miner earnings. Since when have gold miners had like good earnings that people care about. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So that's worth looking at. Silver is just below 30, hanging out right here. It's a little bit different looking than gold, a little bit sloppier, but it is silver, crazy cousin. It moves a little bit differently. I think that miners are going to continue to be in play. I think GDX looks very constructive here. I think it might need some time here. Like, look, we're right back here. Those are the August 2020 highs. These are the April 2022 highs, and we're right back up here to the scene of the crime. Is this shaping up for a massive breakout? This is a weekly chart that we're looking at right here. That's important to note. Going back to the daily, still super constructive right here. Any bounce off of this, I think, is playable. You know, I think we're in a market where it's going to look good almost no matter what. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, lots of topics, lots of things happening. The biggest of which tomorrow after market, we've got NVIDIA, and we'll have all eyes, all hands on deck for seeing what happens there, and everyone will be watching. CNBC will be going nuts, whatever's going on there. So, Gunnar, thanks for all the breakdown on all this stuff, and I appreciate the gravity on. We covered a lot on NVIDIA, but it was a lot of the things like ideas and sentiment around it, and then in general, a lot of other decent looking charts there, and some sectors that we might see some rotation into. So
Yep.
we appreciate it. And as always, everyone at home, thanks for all the comments on YouTube. Give us a like. Make sure you're subscribed. And we'll see you next week on Top Trades. Thanks, Gunnar. Thanks, everybody.